Thank you everyone for coming to the January Investor Club. I am really excited about this topic because this topic sets the stage for wealth building all year. And so we're going to talk about some actionable steps that you can take to kick off your wealth building. Do me one favor, give this to Dina in the back. Thank you. Actionable steps you can take to launch your wealth building, whether you're at the beginning stages, whether you're in the middle stages and you don't know where to take it next. We're going to talk about some tools and models that have really helped me personally in our wealth building journey. So I started investing back 11 years ago, 2013, but the mindset started way before that. I watched my dad work for 30 years in a physically demanding job. He was in a wastewater plant for the city of Cincinnati. So you held your nose every time you drove by his facility. And at 30 years in his job, I kind of was home from college for that weekend, and I just asked him, I said, so when are you going to retire? And he looked at me and he paused and he said, I can't retire right now because the markets are down. And he had been taught his whole life to invest in stocks and mutual funds and that would provide for his retirement. But here we were, it was 2009, the markets were rattled, and he was now handcuffed to his job and had to work 5 more years until the markets recovered. And so I remember walking away from that conversation knowing that I wasn't going to have my retirement years taken away from me like that. I didn't know what I was going to do at the time, but I knew it was going to be different. And so I started originally on the very traditional path, went to college, got a good job working for General Electric, and that's where I met my husband, who's my husband now, and we were moving around the country, and he invited me to an investing class one night. And I show up, and I think it's an investing class on like 401ks and things like that, and it turns out it was a real estate investing class through the Robert Kiyosaki Rich Dad Poor Dad group. And literally that night changed my life. I was making $66,000 as an engineer for GE, and they showed me how you can flip 2 houses a year and make $60,000 a year on 2 flip houses. And I was like, ding, 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 the light bulbs are going off. And so it just so happened that GE sold off our businesses a few months after that class. And we had the opportunity to move to Texas. I quit my corporate job. I read a book on flipping houses. I read a book on rental properties. And we came to DFW in 2013 when the real estate market was amazing. And I started our real estate investing business. So I did flips, rentals. 2017 comes around. I transitioned to large multifamily. The profits in single family started to compress. So we jumped into large multifamily. We've done 8 syndications since then, and which is about $250 million in assets, which we own with groups of investors, and we still own 6 of those properties. So my husband's full-time job is really managing those 6 properties that we have. And then my job is managing all of our other investments. And so we do note investing, we are passive investors. We do a lot of other things. We're also in a lot of masterminds. We want to put ourselves in the right places with the right people. And that's what led me to KW Wealth. And KW Wealth has been an amazing resource. We're going to talk about some of the models that they've shared with us that have changed my life. And overall, it's been an amazing, amazing experience. So let's talk about the steps. And we're going to quick overview. We're going to go through each one individually. The first one is the path of money. The second one is the net worth tracking, personal financials, 4 conditions of money. Then we're going to go into dead money, and we're going to wrap it up with wealth GPS. So this is what we're going to talk about for about the next 45, 50 minutes, and we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. So first, path of money. Everybody got a handout here. And if you can actually Google Gary Keller's Path of Money. This is from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. And if you see it, this can be a guideline. If you don't know where to start, if you're at the very beginning phases of your wealth building journey, start with Path of Money. It's going to combine, at first you need to take into account two different things. The human capital, which is you working for money. Like you go out there, you work, you make money. But then there's also a second thing called they call it capital assets. And that's where your money is working for you. Your money is working for you. So you're making money while you sleep on the right side. That all flows down into how much cash flow you make. But then you have 4 choices on what to do with that cash flow. You can spend it, you can donate it, you can hold it or put it in reserves. Hold to me really means reserves, or you can invest it. And it's very important. We're going to talk in the next step about knowing these numbers and knowing how much there is left to invest. And then after that, for investing, you really have 2 choices. You can lend or you can own. And there's active ownership, active lending, and there's passive ownership and passive lending. And so the chart down below just gives some examples. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There's lots and lots of other opportunities and asset classes that you can invest in. That all comes down to your financial returns, which goes back into your money working for you. And our goal is to have more money coming in from the capital asset side than the human capital side. So that when the day comes when you don't want to work anymore, or you can't work anymore, that there is money coming in to supplement your lifestyle. So everything we talk about we're going to tie back to the path of money today. So let's talk about net worth tracking. And if you're familiar with Keller Williams and some of the leaders at Keller Williams, Wendy Papasan is, I want to say, Gary Keller's right-hand woman. And she's one of my mentors within KW. Her and her husband, Jay, have built up a huge real estate investing portfolio. They started investing in Austin probably 25 years ago, and they hold a lot of properties. She runs a group for women that we track our net worth every month, and it's called Net Worth Club. I'm going to play a quick video from her. This is her kickoff of Net Worth Club, and she gives some insights into why net worth tracking is so critical. And I'm going to share why it's critical for us, but I also want to hear from Wendy and how it has impacted their lives as well. So let's see if this is going to work.
Just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Wendy Papasan, and I am super excited. I'm chairman of the board for Her Best Life, which is the organization that's kind of affiliated with Net Worth Club. And I'm super excited because this club is I don't even know, like a 5-year dream for me coming true tonight. So nobody succeeds alone. This is an idea that I had. My husband and I had a goal of helping people become millionaires. And that's been a goal of ours for a long time, over a decade. And probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I turned to him and I said, well, what are we really doing? What are we really doing to help people become millionaires? And it's nice to say that, and it's nice to have that as a goal, but what are we really doing? And so then at that time, we started a net worth club for our teams. So we started meeting once a month, tracking our net worth and helping our team members become millionaires. And I'm happy to say that we've made many, many millionaires on our team. And right now, the average net worth of people on our teams is about 1.6 million. That's not with us in there. And so I'm just really excited to be here tonight. And some of you maybe know what you're getting into. Some of you don't know what you're getting into. But I just want to let you know, there's no need to be nervous, right? Everybody starts somewhere with their net worth. And when Jay and I started, we started tracking our net worth about 20 years ago. And when we started tracking our net worth, we had just moved to Austin, and we were renting. Jay had a 401k, and we had a lot of debt. Honestly, not a lot of debt. We had some debt. We had school debt. And so we ended up tracking our net worth, and our net worth was about $2,200. So $2,200. And we weren't young. We weren't old, but we weren't young. We were both about 30. And it was actually great in a way because a lot of people, when they start tracking their net worth, they're in debt. And that's okay if that's you. But it was a big aha moment for us because we realized that we'd both been collectively working for about 22 years, you know? And so here we were with a net worth of $2,200, which essentially equated to about $100 for every year of work. And that was really startling for me. And I think about my dad, who I love, who worked hard his whole life, a very hard worker, but never put his money into an investments. And so here he is. He's going to be 82 this year. His net worth is very low, 60 plus years of work, and he has really literally nothing to show for it. And so this habit of tracking our net worth has just been super powerful for us as a couple and as individuals because it allows us to focus on the right things. A lot of times we're focused on income, right? We think about, our parents tell us to become a doctor or a lawyer or, a realtor or get in sales, whatever that is. And the reality is those people that are on the Forbes richest 500 list, they own businesses and they own assets. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times we're tracking the thing that doesn't matter because if you make $250,000 a year and you spend $251,000 a year, what are you? Broke. You're broke. Yeah, you're in debt. And so net worth helps us also think about what we're spending, okay, and the assets that we're creating. And so that's why we're here tonight, guys, is because I want everybody to go on this journey just like we did. And I want you to look up and be wealthier than you ever imagined, in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15 years, or 20 years. And I just want to share my screen briefly before we introduce our lovely co-host, Deb. But here is a screen share of our net worth over time. So you can see we started tracking in the early 2000s. Our net worth was not very much. And then all those years in the 2000s, 2005, 7, 9, 10, 12, nothing changed a lot. Although we were building our assets then, we were acquiring investment properties and investing in the stock market. And then somewhere about 2015, all that hard work that we'd done for 10 plus years, all of that feeling poor, honestly, because we felt poor. We felt poor in those 10 years. All of that feeling poor starts to take off because of the hard work that we've been doing for the last 10 years. And it's not sexy to think about being thrifty for a decade. Like nobody's, I'm not going to sell a lot of late night infomercial products with that tagline, but that's really the reality of it. And that's really what success looks like. It's sort of managing expenses, tracking your net worth, understanding what's important. And then you can look up one day and you can be wealthier than you ever dreamed possible. And I am here because I want that for you guys. And the best way to do that is this one habit. This one habit of net worth tracking is for sure the most powerful habit that I will ever do. And it's very simple. You do it once a month, right? And now you guys get to come and you get to basically have a happy hour once a month and do it with your friends, which is really cool too. So that's kind of an overview of the genesis of the Net Worth Club. And we're here because, like I said, I want you guys to be on this journey with me. And what you focus on expands, right? What you water what you want to grow. And so that's what we're doing here tonight.
So a couple key points that I love from that video. One, wealth does not happen overnight. It takes time. It needs time for your investments to grow in value, for investments to compound. It all comes down to very simple habits. Very simple habits. My favorite quote from the video was, the one habit of net worth tracking is, for sure, in Wendy's words, the most powerful habit that I will ever do. And it's easy because you only have to do it once a month. So every month, my husband and I, one of the reasons I connect with Wendy and Jay so much is my husband and I have been tracking our net worth for 13 years, ever since we started dating. I don't know why, but it was one of those things where as soon as we left corporate and we went from 2 full-time paychecks to 1 paycheck and one person trying to start a business, we knew we had to track our money. And it tells you if you're profiting, right? Wendy said, if you spend every dollar you make, you're going to be broke. And it's going to show on your net worth plan. Your net worth plan isn't going to go anywhere. Your net worth is going to stay stagnant or go down if that's the habit that you get into. But if you can stay diligent about knowing your income, knowing your expenses, managing those, and then going back to the path of money, setting aside funds to invest each year so that you can have investments that grow over time. In 10 years from now, you can look up and be massively wealthier than you are today. And that's the beauty of investing. So what does net worth tracking, what does that look like? Well, there's 2 main documents, and you have them in front of you in a very simple Excel spreadsheet version. The first one is a profit and loss statement. So at the top, you'll see profit and loss statement. And what this shows us is what we earn versus what we spend. And when we say earn, that could be commissions, it could be W-2 income, it could be business income, it could be royalty income, anything like that. What we spend, this is personal expenses, business expenses, this is everything. This is all the money coming out for expenses. And you see some examples here of both the personal and business side. So this document, not only is it called a profit and loss statement, but I'm actually going to shorten it because it's usually called a P&L, profit and loss, P&L. And it's also called an income statement. So all of those mean the exact same things. It means your income and your expenses, which come down to a bottom line of your profit. I'm going to have a QR code in a few slides where you can download an Excel version of this. And it's all built with formulas. So if you start plugging in things in the top, you'll get the profit calculated at the bottom. Now the next one, it shows what you own. I don't know, what is that little thingy right there? There we go. What you own and what you owe. And that's on the other side. That's called our balance sheet. So your balance sheet shows you what you own and what you owe. And when I say own, I mean your house, cash, investment properties, investment brokerage accounts, 401ks, things like that. And your liabilities are things that you owe money on. So car loan, house loan, credit card payments, medical bills, anything that you have outstanding loan-wise. Estimated taxes are also on here. And that's important because if you know you've got a $50,000 tax bill coming up, personally, I wouldn't count it in my net worth because I know that money's coming out of my bank account in the next few months. And so you see examples here, and this is called your balance sheet. So when I say personal financials, I'm talking about 2 documents. I'm talking about your profit and loss, your P&L, and I'm talking about your balance sheet. Now, Wendy was specifically talking about your balance sheet, tracking your net worth, but I personally believe you need to do both. You got to know if you're making money, because otherwise it's going to be a lot harder to plan where that money is going to go. So tracking your financials is the number one habit. If you don't do it, it's the number one thing you can do to start doing in 2025 to launch your wealth journey. Now for us, our balance sheet has been our decision maker. So if there's an opportunity to invest in something and we need $25,000 to invest in it, we go to our balance sheet and we say, do we have the funds? Do we have it in cash? Do we have it in another investment that's liquid? Do we have it in a brokerage account that we can liquidate. And so our balance sheet serves as part of our roadmap to make investing decisions. Now let's just do a quick exercise. Yes. Yeah.
Do you ever borrow money to take advantage of great opportunities and investments?
You know, personally, so we borrow, the question is, do we borrow money to take advantage of investments? So we have some strategies where we pair investors with different investments because we work a lot with investors. And so I might bring on an investor at 7% interest, and then I'm investing that money at 12%. But I haven't really, in terms of like going to the bank and getting like a home equity line of credit, I haven't used that kind of other people's money to make investments. My word of caution, if you're going to try to use a line of credit, is to make sure that it's a long enough term, because like I have a line of credit with my bank and it renews every year. Well, if I'm going to go and put that in a 5-year investment, but then all of a sudden the bank changes their mind and decides they want to call the line of credit due, I don't want to be in a pinch where that money is now due to the bank and it's an illiquid asset. So, okay. So thinking about profit and loss and our balance sheet, assets and liabilities, where would your realtor commissions and your costs show up? Are they income? Yep. Are they expenses? Are they assets?
No.
No. Are they liabilities? Hopefully not. Hopefully you're not putting a whole bunch of stuff on credit cards that you can't pay. So your realtor income and expenses are only going to show up on your profit and loss statement. What about your personal home if you have a mortgage on it? Does it bring in income normally? No. Does it have expenses? Yes. Is it an asset that you own?
Yes, yeah.
And does it have a liability on it? Yes. So it would show up under expenses on your P&L and on your balance sheet under assets and liabilities. Now, one more example. What about a rental property that has a mortgage on it? Does it have income?
Yes.
Expenses? Is it an asset? And is it a liability? It shows up all 4 places. So this is just showing that some things show up on one document, some things show up on another document, and some show up on both. So you'll see examples right here, and if you get bored and you want to zone out, just go through and start putting check marks near each one that you know you have, because you'll need a number for that when you start filling out your net worth and your P&L. So here's the P&L download if you want the Excel version of this. So we use Excel to bring everything together, but I think the biggest roadblock that people say is, well, I've got a lot of spending. You know, I have, personally, we've got 2 different credit cards, personal credit cards, we've got a business credit card, we've got things that come out of our bank accounts directly, and how do we pull all that together very easily and just spit out a number for an expense? We personally use Monarch Money. I believe Empower and Rocket Money are still free. Simplify is paid and Monarch Money is paid. So those are some of the options that you have for kind of expense. I'm going to call it expense and income reconciliation. It pulls it all together and makes it very, very easy so that at the end of the month, it shows, and I'll show you a screenshot, like, okay, you've spent $912 on groceries, even though that could have come from multiple credit cards, Amazon, this, that, things like that. So I'm going to show a couple screenshots on Monarch. The hardest thing that you have to do is actually tell it, like, if something comes from Venmo, for example, I need to tell it whether that was for a babysitter, whether that was for a donation, whether that was for if that was shopping, right? I could have bought something on Venmo for shopping. So the hardest thing to do is just to go through and categorize what each one is. Venmo, Amazon is another example. Amazon, where you're like, oh, is that shopping? Is that groceries? Is that home? You know, you're just telling it what category it is. And it's much, much easier than QuickBooks. And Monarch is $10 a month. So it's much cheaper than QuickBooks. QuickBooks is like $50 a month. So at the end of the month, it spits out a chart that looks like this, and it tells me where my income, what categories my income is from, but more importantly, what we use it for is the expenses. So I could just take this number and I could go to, I could go to the P&L, and my mortgage, which I put under home, for example, I put in that expense. Then I go to childcare and I put in childcare. Then I go to auto and I put in auto. And it makes it really easy where I'm not the one actually doing all the calculations and addition, like where did I spend all this money from? Yes.
So, two questions. Can we split the expenses we made? You just put the childcare.
Mm-hmm. Can you split it? Absolutely. Yep, it lets you split accounts. And even for Amazon, if you wanted to go into that much detail and you said, okay, I spent $100 at Amazon, $50 was groceries, $50 was home, home furnishings, you could do that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I might buy it, use it with my account. So can we share the same account?
So my husband and I just have the account's under his name, but I have the app and I use his login and I log in and I can categorize things myself. Did you have a question?
So I know this is for like wine ad. Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's just you need a budget, but it's like the same thing. So do you have one just for your personal and also one for your business?
Great question.
Yes.
So my account, we use Monarch for personal. That's a great question. Monarch is for personal, so my accountant doesn't usually get this. Now there is a tab, it's not in this one, for business expenses. But I do use QuickBooks for some of our business stuff. And anything that's labeled business expenses, I know needs to go to my accountant. But otherwise, my accountant doesn't get my auto bills and insurance payments and stuff like that. But it does help me. At the end of the year, I can go back and look at Monarch, and it'll tell me for childcare, for example, daycare, how much I spent. But they're also going to send me a tax form. The other thing it does, Monarch also calculates your net worth. So if you wanted to put in all of your assets, if you wanted to tell it, my house is worth this, it'll pull his estimate automatically. If you want to give it investment properties that you own, if you want to link your investment brokerage accounts, it will give you a net worth every single day. It'll show you your net worth. But I still think it's important to take that next step and put it into an Excel spreadsheet because it gives you accountability for it. Like if you're not actually looking at the number and seeing what it looks like month over month over month, you're not going to be able to see the trends. So tracking your financials focuses on the top half of the path of money. That's really the base of knowing where your money's coming in from and how are you going to allocate it once it's in your bank account. Now, one more, this is actually a chart from Robert Kiyosaki, and this is really talking about like end goal, big picture. We start with a typical teenager, and a typical teenager just has a little bit of income and maybe a little bit of expenses, and that's it. There's no other there's no assets, there's no liabilities. They're very simple living because they're relying on mom and dad. And then you have a typical adult that makes money from their job, and that job has to pay for all of their expenses and all of their liabilities. And so you see that money has to go towards both categories. Then you have the wealth building mindset, which should be all of our goal, where we have assets that produce income, that income pays for our expenses and our liabilities. That is the end goal, so that you do not have to work a day longer than you need to or want to, because you have assets that are creating income, not you personally creating the income. Your money is working for you. So this is just kind of an overall view of mindset-wise what we're shooting for. We're shooting for assets that create income so that one day we no longer have to work.
So,
Yeah.
on that last piece, you've got assets that are creating.
Mm-hmm.
At what point I'm assuming, maybe that's wrong, but let's just say that what we want our assets to do is create money so that we can invest more, or, what did you call it? Where you hold it, or
Let it, yeah.
wherever you're putting it, you're not spending it, it's generating more. At what point, or how do you make a transition of, okay, I want to retire tomorrow? How do I know how much? How do you calculate, or how do you figure out? And this is probably just way too big a question.
Well, the first step, if you have tracked your profit and loss for a year or two, you will know your expenses. And this is when we made the decision for my husband to leave his corporate job, we based it on, we knew how much we spent every year. And let's say we spend $70,000 a year. So if you have income, like let's say you currently make $300,000 a year and your investments are bringing in $50,000 a year. Well, you know that if today you stopped working, you'd have a $20,000 negative, right? Because you're spending 70. Now you could say, well, is there anywhere I could cut out some spending? But essentially knowing your expenses, which comes from tracking your financials for a period of time and getting an average, like maybe this year it was 70, maybe next year it's 65, maybe next year it's 80. Knowing your expenses, you can use that as a baseline to say, that's what we did. We said, okay, our expenses are 70. As long as our real estate can bring in $70,000 a year, Adam can quit his job, because I know I'm at least going to be even. And that's a great place to be, starting off, because you can just continue to build your wealth with the assets that you have.
And then there's like assets that give dividends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all kinds of.
Yes, there is.
You recommend like seeing a financial planner, or whoever can calculate, okay, this will give you this amount of dividends, this will, the market will do this, and you can pull that, and then you'll have this tax, liability. And
So we've never used a financial planner because it's always just been our own learning and our own, masterminds. I think that the 4 conditions of money will help, but you're right. There is a big difference between investments that cash flow and investments that don't cash flow. And I think that has to be part of the decision making, and with your personal needs, because you could put money into an investment that's not going to pay out for 5 years, and that doesn't help your cash flow today. So if you need cash flow today, then you would do things more that give dividends, that give monthly P&I payments, that pay out a cash flow on a much more frequent basis. There's a really good book called The Lifestyle Investor that talks about cash flowing assets.
I think another good thing to do is like look at your retirement accounts,
Mm-hmm.
access that cash flow. So if you see investments are attractive, but they don't meet your cash flow needs,
Yes.
your retirement buckets, then put the cash flow in ones that are your non-retirement.
Yeah, great suggestion, Chris.
Yep, let's do it.
The Lifestyle Investor.
Does it ever make sense to take money out of like a retirement fund, like a traditional 401k or traditional Roth or whatever, to consolidate capital to go invest into more income producing assets rather than just holding for the future and relying completely on the markets?
Potentially. Tom Wheelwright, who is Robert Kiyosaki's CPA, is actually a big proponent of cashing out 401ks. Robert Kiyosaki is not a fan of 401ks, so like there are books called 401 Chaos and Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright, or I think it's the Win-Win Wealth Strategy, where he talks about cashing out your 401k. And to me, it's kind of a mindset boom for a lot of people because it's so unorthodox. But yes, there are schools of thought that say this is money that could grow, that if you could use it today and let it grow today. But then there's also the math shows that if it's a Roth, for example, and you're not going to get taxed on any of the gains anyway. Brett Tanner has a really good example, and if you shoot me a reminder email, I can send it to you, where he shows that, like, if you take $400,000 today and it grows at X percent in 20 years, well, if you had to pay tax on that, it's only going to grow to like $5 million. But if you didn't have to pay tax on it, like if it was in a Roth IRA, it could grow to $12 million. And so that's kind of the difference in potential, but it's a matter of, do you need the money now? Do you need the cash flow now? Versus do you need it at 59 and a half or 62 and a half, whatever the age is.
I read the 401k book and I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Although a lot of it really, the things that really kind of tear down the 401k apply more to corporate 401ks. You know, you can set up a self-employed, like a solo 401k.
Yep.
You get around all those limitations, and I think it's
yeah. Like my Roth IRA is invested in syndications and private lending and mortgage notes and alternative assets that are growing, and some of them are cash flowing, some of them are long-term holds. But I still can't touch that money. But the gains are tax-free. So
You can't touch it for how long?
I think 59 and a half still.
Oh, you're at the age.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump to 4 conditions of money. This was one where when I joined KW Wealth Mastermind, I thought I was a smart investor. And lo and behold, I still had a lot to learn, because the 4 conditions of money was one of the first models that I saw Brett Tanner present. And it was pretty eye-opening when my husband and I looked at where our current position was. And if you already track your financials and you're like, been there, done that, check, this is absolutely the next step. Every line item in your balance sheet, you would label with either dead money, safe money, healthy money, or wealthy money. So dead money makes 0 to 4-ish, safe is 5 to 8, healthy is 9 to 12, and wealthy is 13 or above % returns. So cash, probably going to be dead. Mutual funds, maybe safe, maybe healthy, depends, probably safe. Vehicles, dead. Money. Stock market, I don't know, how has it been doing? It's been doing pretty good, maybe healthy or safe. And so you would go through every single line item and label it. And then you would take the amounts and total them up and find out your percentage. And I'm going to give you some guidelines. But this was a big eye-opener, because at the beginning of our journey, we were really just invested in multifamily and dead money. That was really the majority of our balance sheet. And so today, this is about 3 years later, we have made sure to span all the categories: dead, safe, healthy, and wealthy. So now we've gotten into treasury bills with our business reserves, dividend funds, owner financing and notes, private money lending, and we've diversified more in the wealthy category. Before joining KW Wealth, like, it was just kind of, we were overlooking this completely. And so if you don't know where to start, this is just a beginner baseline. This is an example. So if you say, I'm a beginner and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want to put too much money at risk, you could be ideally at 0% dead money, 40% safe, 40% healthy, and 20% wealthy. Now, the wealthy money is important because that is what has the highest potential to grow. Now, it might be higher risk, higher reward. It might be the stuff that has to sit a little bit longer, that doesn't cash flow because it's waiting for the life cycle of the investment. But there needs to be some wealthy money in your portfolio. this is where we're at today. We are at 60% wealthy, 20% healthy, 15% safe, and we still have some dead money because my husband is a pilot and likes airplanes, and our cars are in there too. But this has been a big journey, and one, everybody's case is going to be different because we're fairly young. We have time. I can put more into higher risk, higher reward investments. So I'm comfortable with a 60% in the wealthy category. I've got time. I can take some fluctuations. Now, if somebody's nearing retirement, would you want 60% in the wealthy category? Probably not. That's probably a little heavy. So everybody's journey is going to be a little different. But this is where we started. And this is how we knew we had a problem. Because we were in 80% wealthy, no healthy money, 7% safe, and we had 13% dead money. 13%. That was the amount sitting there making nothing. Like, big learning. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is dead money, because I do think that's one of the lowest hanging fruit in your wealth building journey to start tackling. So first step, track your personal financials. Second step, figure out your dead, safe, healthy, and wealthy categorizations. Like, what are your numbers? What are your percentages? So 4 conditions really focuses on the bottom half of path of money. Where does that money need to get spread out to? What kind of returns are we looking for? And that also goes into the question of, like, does it need to cash flow? Does it not need to cash flow? Working towards your own personal goals. So now let's talk about dead money. Because like I said, dead money is the lowest hanging fruit. And so when you label your balance sheet with all the dead money lines, that's where you know you can tackle it the first and the easiest. So when we did this exercise, this was an actual account statement of mine. This was a savings account. I had $18,000 sitting in savings, and it was making 0.01% interest. So for the whole year, I had made $1.51 and 15 cents that last month. So this was just one example of an account that I knew I could move immediately to something making, at the time, 5%, now 4%. But dead money is any money sitting there making insignificant interest, okay? Now, I'm not going to sell my car just so I have 0% dead money. Like, I'm probably not going to touch the vehicles, so let's focus on checking and savings accounts. There's 3 main dead money solutions. High yield accounts, high yield savings, high yield money markets, treasury bills, and personally, we've gotten into this in the last year, dividend funds. So I'm going to break down each one. If you go to the short version of this class, that's all you get. But I'm going to go into a little more detail on all 3. High yield savings. We personally use M1 Finance. We're getting 4% still, and they offer introductory rate 4.5% for the first 3 months. You see some other examples here. Citibank, Capital One, Wealthfront, Betterment. I will tell you, you will not get these kind of rates with brick and mortar banks. So if you go to Chase, you go to Bank of America, you go to Wells Fargo, they cannot offer these rates because there's just too much overhead. So you're only going to get the 4%-ish with online banks. So if you're not comfortable with online banks, either get comfortable or pick one that's a big name, right? Citibank, Capital One. If you're nervous, go with one of the big guys, as opposed to some of my colleagues invest in Raisin.com. And I'm like, that just sounds a little too fly by night for me, right? So, yeah, there are lots of others. I believe SoFi is another one. But overall, you can get 3.5% to 4.5% interest still. The money is very liquid. We're talking like instantly to 1 day, maybe 2 days max. But the problem is the rates are not locked in. So my Merrill Lynch used to be up here. They used to offer me 5%. Then without even telling me, I have to actually check online to see what my rate is like that week. They can just drop the rates, right?
What?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's now down to 3.67, so they got taken off this list. So they don't have to tell you. They could just drop the rate. So it is not locked in. The returns are not locked in. But typically, these banks are going to be FDIC insured. So if you're concerned about FDIC insurance and the money being like super protected, that these accounts are typically FDIC insured.
Well, a couple things. Since you and I had talked a while back, I did put money in credit unions actually better than some of the bigger banks without going to online banking.
Okay, good.
But what was my other question? You just said
FDIC insurance, not locked in.
yes. Is that 250,000, which is typically what they insure up to? Is that like how significant is that to pay attention to?
Well, it depends on if you think the bank is going to go out of business, but it's my understanding that it's 250,000 per depositor. So if my husband and I are on an account, it should be 500. You know, I believe when, and don't quote me on this, but I believe when Key Bank and there was another bank that failed a couple years ago, all their Signature Bank, yes, all of their depositors were made good, if from what I understand. So, you know,
Step in and bailing that, or
I'm not sure. And that's just what I heard. So,
Hired by another bank.
okay.
The government helped kind of backstop.
Yeah.
It's
Losses. So you could be in two different camps. You could say, well, it's probably going to get bailed out and protected. Or you could say, you know what, I'm not putting more than 500,000 in any account anyway.
I think raisin's too big to fail.
There are, so M1, for example, there are accounts that have up to $3 million in FDIC insurance. So not every bank is at 250.
Okay.
Yeah. You can find banks with higher FDIC insurance.
And you feel like online banks, particularly these ones, they're like solid.
Safe and secure.
So these are just the ones that have the best rates. Like I've never used Betterment. Actually, my husband uses Betterment for his HSA. I've never used Raisin, Wealthfront, Vio, or Capital One.
I think have someone for over 10 years and I'm happy with them. They are like online bank, credit cards and everything, and they are on top of everything.
Capital, which one?
Capital One.
Yes, that's it.
Good questions. So just a quick example, that same $18,500, just by putting it into a high yield savings, I'm making an additional $737 a year. So if it would have stayed in my savings account, it'd be making $3 in interest. Now I'm making about $740. So it's not, we're not talking huge amounts.
It's someone.
It's free money. It is free money that you are passing up by not moving your money out of your regular checking or savings. And it's liquid, and it's FDIC insured still. So there's really no reason not to move it to something getting 4%. Let's talk about treasury bills. I think treasury bills, a while ago, like back when Warren Buffett, long time, they used to be at like 1%, 1.5%, 2%. No, but they were on nobody's radar except for Warren Buffett for some reason, still put money in treasury bills. Now, in the past year or two, they've been at 5s and 4s, and they are currently still at 4.3. Now, this is backed by the good faith and credit of the U.S. government, and they are in certain term lengths. So you either have to buy a 4-week, an 8-week, a 13-week. So the money is locked up for that amount of time. Now, technically, you could sell it on the secondary market. You wouldn't really want to do that, but just pretend it has to be locked up for that length of time. And these are the rates you're getting for those different term lengths. And you have two options. You can buy direct on treasurydirect.gov, which is what I did. It's actually pretty easy. Or you can go through an investment advisor. So like my Merrill Lynch guy, he could invest in treasury bills for me. And he doesn't, there's no extra fees. Now, if you go through an investment advisor, the only thing you may find is that there's a minimum investment of like $1,000, where if you invest directly on treasurydirect.gov, it's a minimum investment of $100. So an example that I've heard for even like teenage kids, you could give them $500. You could have them put 100 in a 4-week, 100 in an 8-week, 100 in a 13, and 100 in a 17. Spread it up and let them see the interest drop into their account every month. And then they get to determine, okay, well, when the 4-week expires, what do we want to put it in next? Do we want to put it in another 4-week, another 8-week? It could be a good little learning exercise for teenage kids to start learning about money and interest and investing. Now, if you have a retirement account through like Charles Schwab or TD Ameritrade or Merrill Lynch, something like that, like you can invest retirement funds into treasury bills as well. Now, if you have a retirement account through Quest Trust Company or Horizon Trust under a custodian, they do not allow treasury bills because they only need, you have to invest in private investments through those kind of custodians. So everybody's going to get these slides. And in the slides, I go through how to buy them on treasurydirect.gov. So I'm not going to go into that detail right here, but just know everybody who RSVP'd is going to get a copy of the slides. So if you ever want to come back and revisit, treasurydirect.gov is where you go. And this goes through step by step what to click on to set up your account and invest in treasury bills. Select bills, put in the amount, pick the type. You do have to load your bank account because they will automatically deposit the interest and the principal back into your bank account, and you hit submit. It's really not hard. It's not hard at all.
So you go back a couple.
Yeah.
Underneath, look, super. Okay, underneath bills, it says notes.
Uh-huh. So those 2 to 10 years.
What kind of notes are we talking about? Like,
So there's a whole different section for like treasury notes, and I probably don't have the thing. If you go to treasury marketable securities, go to treasurydirect.gov, treasury marketable securities, that drop-down menu, it'll let you select treasury notes and you can learn more about that. Those are longer term.
and the traditional like double E savings bonds fall into treasury.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is where I bought my savings bonds, which I have already sold because they went down to 3%. That was another learning from our dead money, 4 conditions of money category. We found out that our Series I bonds, when we bought them, they were making 9%. Well, we checked the current rate and they were making 3%. And I'm like, well, those are getting sold. I can, this was a year ago.
Bonds.
Yeah. And at the time, I could just do better in a high yield savings. So we ended up selling those and moving those from dead money to safe.
Sold those. Now you have a tax implication for that year.
Yep. So I just got a 1099 int from Treasury Direct. Yes. So you can come back and visit this. Just know it is not, it's fair for being like a government website where you can invest in securities. It's fairly user friendly. Okay. Not hard.
These are locked in, right? Now I said 4 weeks is locked in.
It's technically you can sell it on the secondary market, but you would probably take a little bit of a hit. So just plan for it being locked in for 4 weeks. Yes.
About the rates too? I mean, are they?
The rates are locked in. Yes, the rates are locked in. So this shows it. So if you wanted to lock it, so you could get half a year, you get 6 months, and you could lock it in for 4.287.
You choose which funds you're gonna invest this money, or you put the money and you choose for you.
In the Treasury Direct, you have to choose whether you want to do a 4-week, an 8-week, a 13, or a 17. But you could do different amounts. You could do like 10,000 in a 4-week and 10,000 in an 8-week.
That money is invested.
Oh, like where the government invests it?
Yes. You don't.
It's no. They're going to use it however they need, and then they're going to pay you the interest on it and give you your money back at the end. And you do have the option to auto reinvest. Now, the downside is the rates adjust every week. So it could be 4.3, the 4-week is 4.339 this week. It could be higher, it could be lower next week. So let's say you have $50,000 set aside for college tuition, for a new car, for a down payment on the next house, but you don't need this for 6 months, okay? You could get slightly better interest if you put it in a 6-month treasury bill than you would by putting it in high yield savings. And so you would make about $1,000 in interest if you invested that money in a treasury bill, knowing you didn't need it for 6 months.
Would you say CDs are basically the same thing in terms of the option?
I haven't checked CD rates recently, so I'm not sure if they're competitive. My guess is that they've dropped a little bit, but
The fours
are they?
instead of credit union.
So but CDs are sometimes longer term. Like if you can get a 6-month CD for 4.3, then that's essentially the same thing as a treasury bill. Yes.
It's just with the bank.
Yeah. It's just with the bank versus the government. Yep.
How do I make sure I'm besides by the register?
Here's one of my cards, and you can send me an email, or my email's also on the flyer.
Okay.
And I will make sure you get the slides.
Thank you, sorry I'm late for it.
Sorry, that's okay. Okay. Now, another thing to keep in mind to amplify the returns is, let's say you have profits each month that you're going to put towards this $50,000. You could then take those and put those into 4-week T-bills. If you say, okay, I'm saving up for something, but I can't put it aside for 6 months, but I could put it aside for 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And so that would be a way to amplify those returns and put more dead money to work. So dead money really helps us get more capital assets. You know, it may not be a huge sum of money, but we've got one account that I think we made almost $20,000 in interest last year, just because we moved it from a dead money account to a 5%, 4 to 5% account. So this is free money that you're passing up by not taking action. And then going back, it can also, on the bottom part of Path of Money, it can help you determine where you need to put funds. So if you look at your allocations and you have no wealthy investments and you've got money set aside, you know that you could take some funds and put it up into wealthy. And that might be 10% of your portfolio. It might be 20. It might be more. But that's, to me, knowing where your dead money is can instantly provide you some potential investing dollars. Okay, so let's talk about income funds. I'm going to check the time because both of those clocks are different. Okay. Income funds. This is a book. This is based on The Income Factory by Stephen Bavaria. And these are publicly traded securities. So they're on the open market. They're funds. So the fund owns lots of holdings. And they pay dividends on a monthly basis, typically. So we're talking, it's like monthly cash flow. Now, the cash flow can be pretty good. We're getting on average 10 to 12% monthly cash flow with these dividend funds. And most are paying monthly, some pay quarterly. And not only is the fund have multiple holdings, but I'm investing in like 10 to 20 different funds. And so it is spreading out the risk between the funds. Now, I didn't know which funds to invest in. The author tells you exactly which ones. He tells you in the book, but the book was written in 2019. So it's like, well, that's a long time ago. A lot's happened since 2019. And so there's actually a current blog on seekingalpha.com that the author produces lists every 3 months to say, here are the exact funds to invest in. Here are the exact funds that I suggest. And I basically just took his recommendations. And he has different lists for tax advantaged accounts, like IRA accounts that don't pay taxes. And then if you have a taxable account, like cash that you're investing, he suggests different funds because of the way they treat their dividends so it's better tax treatment for you for cash investments. Yes, Morgan.
Familiar with Seeking Alpha? Is that for sort of subscription or?
So yeah, Seeking Alpha, you do pay. Now what the trick is, you get 2 free weeks. So you sign up with an email address, you get a 2-week free trial, and then you can choose to cancel. So we've done this twice now with 2 different emails. You sign up for the 2-week free trial, you download all the lists, you read all the articles, and then you cancel. And then 6 months later, I use a different email address. I do another 2-week subscription. I know, right? I could probably do it 2 more times. But honestly, we take one stance is we take a set it and forget it stance with this. So I don't want to necessarily be reading the articles every day. I'm happy with just like checking in on it every 6 months. But if you did want to keep up with it every day, it's not that much. It's like $120 a year, maybe $10 a month. The dividends are not guaranteed. So, but the book tells you how to reduce the risk. So they say, okay, invest in a fund that's been around more than 10 years or 5 years and invest in something that's been paying dividends for more than 10 years, for example, and the dividends have been consistent through other cycles. Self-directed retirement accounts can invest in these. I'm going to show you an example of how our Roth IRA is invested in them, but the returns are not guaranteed. And if you read Stephen Bavaria's current articles on Seeking Alpha, he makes a big differentiation, and I think this is really interesting because my husband's in the camp that like there's going to be a stock market crash. Stephen Bavaria makes a big differentiation between equity funds and debt-based funds. And Stephen says that if there's a huge crash, equity funds are more likely to experience a correction. The debt funds are a little more protected because debt is a safer position than the equity. And so we have taken that feedback from Stephen to make sure that we are not too heavily invested in equity funds and that we have more debt funds just in case there is a crash. So there's ways, like I said, the book goes into all the details. There's ways to protect yourself with this asset class and get 10 to 12% cash flow.
Can you give us an example of what a debt fund?
Yes. So a debt fund, for example, there's something called like first position loans, right? So these are loans on either commercial real estate or office buildings or businesses. And so if somebody if a fund owns 100 first position loans, right? We're all familiar with first position. Like that's the number one that gets paid back first, right? First position loans versus something like GE stock. GE stock is equity, right? And the first thing that's going to go down and lose value is the equity portion, right? The loans are more protected than the equity. It's kind of like in a foreclosure. The equity gets lost, but the lender gets whatever's left. So the lender is in the safer position than like the homeowner in a foreclosure.
So how do you fight these first position loans?
So he gives you the tickers. Yeah. And he gives you the categories. There's like a category called senior loans, and which means first position loans. And he could give you 10 tickers. And
Offered in taxable like Schwab account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Typically. Now, Schwab may not give you access to 100% of them, but it should give you access to 90, 95%. So.
And in terms of like risk reward,
Mm-hmm.
the equity funds versus the debt funds, is it similar?
The equity funds, so what we found, I'm going to show you an example actually. Yeah, let me get to that. So this was part of our reallocation. When we did the dead money exercise, we found 30,000 in Series I bonds that were making 3%, needed to move. We had 13,000 in cash in TD Ameritrade that was like, we didn't even know what it was in. And then we had 14,000 in a Roth IRA in TD Ameritrade. Again, we weren't even paying attention to what it was invested in. So all of those money went into dividend funds, which spread it really, it's technically in the healthy money, but it varies between safe and healthy. So here's the actual dividend earned. And this was in my Roth IRA, and this is Adam's Roth IRA. So we have 13 funds, and each fund has like hundreds of holdings. So lots and lots of assets. A year ago, we deposited it. I think we deposited, 13,000. We've made 1,500 in dividends, and the yield is 10%. Now, if you look at the total return here, my total return is 20%. These are in equity funds. And the reason, because the last year the stock market has done really, really good, right? So those equity funds are more volatile to go up and down. So the last year, the stock prices of the funds have actually gone up, which is why that total return says 20% instead of just 10. So 10% came from dividends and 10% came from stock prices going up. So this is one where we will look at making it a little more credit-based, because I feel like we've squeezed some of the juice out. But very similar to the second one. This was our I-bond and our TD Ameritrade cash. We're invested in, we now have 21 holdings in that one. A year ago, we made $4,700 in dividends, and we're getting 11.89% yield. And that one has a total return of almost 19% as well, because those equity funds have gone up in value, whereas the credit funds, they really stay very, like Stephen Bavaria explains in his book, the goal isn't really for stock price growth. The goal is the dividend. Like, I'm okay if the stock price stays the exact same and I'm getting an 11% dividend. And so that's the difference between the credit funds. The debt funds, they really don't fluctuate much, because the loan is the loan is the loan. Like, does that make sense? Yeah.
It's from your Monarch out too.
This is M1.
Oh.
M1 is where we do our dividend investing, and they offer a 4% high yield savings. Okay, we're going to wrap it up with Wealth GPS. And if you're familiar with some of the Keller Williams models, GPS stands for goals, priorities, and strategies. It's also called a 1-3-5. 1 goal, 3 priorities, and 5 strategies per priority. And I've got some templates for you here. I've got a blank template, and then I've got an example filled out for you to have. So if you want the blank template, scan that QR code. But really the question is, if you could accomplish one wealth-related thing this year, what would it be? And we try to make this a SMART goal: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-based.
Did you say 5 strategies per priority?
Yep. And I'll show an example. So this is just an example. Yep, go back. Yep.
Good team.
And that, in case you need it for future, is also right here on your handout, the blank one. So this is just an example that KW Wealth put together. Increase cash flow by $12,000 a year annually, so an additional $1,000 a month. We'll say by the end of 2025. So that's the one goal. And then you set 3 priorities. What are the 3 ways you're going to help contribute to that goal? An example would be add 2 rentals or 2 investments to your portfolio that cash flow $7,200 a year. And so it doesn't have to be rentals. It could be notes. It could be dividend funds. It could be this. It could be that. Add X to my portfolio to bring in an additional X $1,000 a year. And then what are your strategies to do that? If the goal was to add rentals, which in DFW is very hard to do right now, one, you got to save money for the down payment. You have to identify 3 markets, add agent and investor contacts to help find deals out of state. This is just examples. Underwrite 3 deals a week, and secure a lender and loan pre-approval for those rental properties. So if the goal was to invest in dividend funds, it could look like read Stephen Bavaria's book, do a 2-week trial, read some articles, download the lists, start an investment brokerage account if I don't have one, pick the funds, make the investment. A second priority could be around dead money. And the way they put it is maintain modest returns on family savings and business savings. So your business reserves can also be invested, is also considered dead money. Those could be invested in treasury bills, high yield savings, things like that. So move to this was back when rates were 5%. T-bills averaging 5%, high yield savings 5%, and then priority 3 could be something else that gets you towards that goal. So this whole example is here available for you if you want to scan like the filled out example, but it puts some clarity around what's the goal for this year? And maybe the goal is just to do your monthly financials and to get an idea for where you stand. And if that's the goal, that's perfectly fine, because that will help you next year to advance those goals. Maybe the goal is to $10,000 of additional income a year. Maybe it's something else. So it puts some clarity around here. And it also helps you create some goals with your P&L. Personally, I think KW Wealth also thinks you should target a minimum of 10% of your profits that get invested. So ideally, you're not spending 100% of it. Ideally, you're spending 60, 70% of the money you're bringing in, and then there's money left over for investing, for donating. Hopefully you've got some reserves set up. If you don't have reserves, that would be number 1. Build up those. So the Wealth GPS just helps us put some clarity around what we're going to do to build our wealth this year. Wrapping it all up, the reason the Path of Money to me is one of the most comprehensive models is because it takes it all into account. The top part is the net worth tracking and the Wealth GPS. The bottom part is the dead money, 4 conditions of money, and the Wealth GPS. It all comes together in the Path of Money. And so if you feel lost, that's definitely the place to start. I have a couple other book recommendations. The Psychology of Money is a really good one. This is talked about frequently in KW Wealth. The Banker's Code is my favorite book on teaching why the lender is in the safest position. And so if you've never considered being on the lending side, it's really interesting. And I'm really glad Gary did this. When you have 2 investment choices, the first one is lend and the second one is own. And most people only think that there's an own option. They don't even realize there's a lend option. And if you read the Banker's Code, you'll realize why the lend option can be a really, really good one. And it's a very easy read. It's just like it's story based, and you don't want to put it down.
Can you take 2 minutes just to elaborate on the difference between lending and owning? Like,
Yeah.
if you've got some capital and you want to go buy an investment versus you want to lend that money out.
Absolutely. So think of a flip property, right? You have an investor that's going to flip a house. Let's say he's going to pay $100,000. He's going to put 20 in, and he's going to sell it for $150, right? So the investor is going to own that flip, right? But then there's a lender probably that's going to lend maybe $100,000 on it. And the lender doesn't have to do the work. He's in a first position loan. So if something happens to the flipper, he doesn't pay, he gets the house. So that would be a simple example of, let's say you had $100,000 and you could go and put it as a down payment on a rental property, or you could lend that money out for 12% with 12% interest and 2 points up front, or 13% interest with 3 points up front, and have less risk in the investment than the flipper.
The less returns, obviously.
Potentially less returns. I mean, the flipper, if he holds it too long and he overspends and he finds that the sewer lines are busted and now he has to spend $15,000 more to tunnel under the house, and there go his profits, the lender could make more than the flipper.
Yeah. And the lender's probably not going to get wiped out completely if they
Right.
underwrite it right.
Yeah.
The equity holder can lose everything.
Yep. So the banker's code is a great mindset opener if you've never considered lending as an option. 10x is easier than 2x. If you need like focus and you need like growth in your business or in wealth or anything, great book. And then, like I mentioned, The Income Factory, just because it was such a game changer for us to help us put dead money to work and get consistent monthly cash flow. Okay, let's open it up to Q&A. Before we do, I want to say next month, we are having a gentleman named Billy Glass. He is a hotel syndicator. So that means that he buys hotels very locally. We're talking like the current project he was working on was on the DFW airport grounds. They were building a hotel. And he pulls together investors. So you could drive by the hotel and say, oh, I own part of that. Just like I do with multifamily, just like people do with oil and gas and self-storage. This gentleman does it for hotels. So opportunities for passive investments once you get to know him. And so Billy Glass with Gentry Mills Capital is going to be presenting next month on hotel syndications. And he is a very local investor. So we're talking local hotels.